A chained ranger. A sudden explosion. One dog down, the other chasing a killer into the woods. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The forest didn't make a sound. No wind, no birdsong, just the crunch of paws and boots over dried pine needles and the low, rhythmic panting of two canine units cutting through the trees like shadows given form. Bane took the lead. Larger, older, his black and tan coat streaked with mud and pine dust. His muscles moved with practiced precision, his head low to the ground, ears pinned back, breath controlled. Shadow trailed close behind, younger and leaner, more instinct than discipline. His tongue flicked in and out as he caught a sudden shift in scent, sweat, rust, human skin, and something older, something foul. Deputy Tyler Briggs, 42, grizzled and unshaved, was barely keeping pace behind them, his vest rattling with gear. Officer Megan Dalton, 29, was calmer, more agile, her rifle strapped tight across her chest, radio silent but ready. "Shadow, what do you got?" Briggs muttered between breaths, eyes darting from trunk to trunk. But the dogs had already made their call. Both German shepherds stopped cold at the edge of a sun-drenched clearing. Not a wide space, maybe 20 feet across, but perfectly still, like the forest had been holding its breath for what was hidden inside it. And there she was, Sarah Lowell, chained to a pine so wide it looked like it had grown specifically to hide her. Her park ranger uniform was no longer green but faded brown, stained with dried blood, dirt, and sweat. Her brown hair clung to her face in matted clumps. One boot was missing. Her pants were shredded around the knees. A rusted chain wrapped around her waist and disappeared behind the trunk, padlocked in place. But it was her wrists that told the real story. Skin peeled raw, scabbed over in rings, like she'd tried to break free until her own body begged her to stop. Still, her eyes didn't plead. They stared, dry, wide, watching the dogs like they were angels that had come too late. Shadow was the first to move. He padded forward, slowly, carefully, then curled his body around her, resting his head on her lap like he knew how close she was to breaking. She flinched, just a tremor, then let her hand fall, fingers grazing the dog's head like it was the first living thing she trusted. Bane barked once, sharp and low, the signal for alive but critical. Behind them, Briggs cursed under his breath and dropped to a knee, heart thudding. Then Sarah's lips parted, her voice barely a thread. "You found me." And in that broken murmur, the forest exhaled. Deputy Briggs dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he reached for the rusted chain biting into Sarah's waist. The padlock was old, crusted with time and neglect. His fingers slipped as he fumbled for the keys clipped to his vest. He cursed under his breath, then caught her eyes, those quiet, waiting eyes, and paused. "Who did this to you?" he asked, low, controlled. Sarah's voice cracked but didn't falter. "A hunter. Name's Wade Gentry. I wrote him up last week. Illegal blinds near the creek. He said I was ruining everything, scaring off his prey." Her breath hitched. I didn't think he meant me." Dalton stood behind Briggs, one hand on her sidearm, the other gripping her radio so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Unit 6 to dispatch," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "We've located Ranger Lowell. Female, critical but responsive, visible restraints, signs of premeditated captivity, requesting immediate medical evac and tactical backup." The radio crackled to life with confirmation, but no one relaxed. Bane moved in slow arcs around the clearing, nose close to the earth, tail stiff, growl low and constant. He wasn't scanning, he was warning. Shadow hadn't budged from Sarah's side, his head now resting gently on her thigh, as if anchoring her to the moment, to the fact that she was alive and wasn't alone. Briggs finally snapped the lock open and eased the chain off with a gentleness that felt foreign on his calloused hands. Sarah winced but didn't cry out. She didn't even flinch as Dalton knelt beside her and pulled the thermal blanket around her trembling shoulders. "You're safe now," Dalton whispered. "You're gonna be okay." Sarah gave a weak smile, lips cracked and bleeding. "Your dogs. They knew I was still here." "They're the best we've got," Briggs said, his voice rougher than before. She looked down at Shadow, running her hand slowly through his fur, fingers trembling. He didn't leave, not even for a second. Above them, the filtered sunlight cut through the branches like gold bleeding through ash. It touched Sarah's face, warming the dirt and bruises there, and for the first time in 3 days, she closed her eyes and exhaled like someone remembering how to breathe. Hope, fragile and flickering, had returned. But no one saw the tripwire. Not yet. Not behind the tree. It happened faster than breath. A snap. A hiss. Then, detonation. The world fractured in a deafening boom. The forest screamed as bark exploded from tree trunks and soil erupted in a spray of fire and steel. The sky itself seemed to collapse in on the clearing. Briggs was launched sideways, a wall of heat slamming into his chest, his vision white-hot with pain. He hit the ground hard, ribs groaning under the impact. Dalton flew backward, her body twisting mid-air before landing in a heap against a rotted log. Her radio shattered. Her ears rang like a siren had crawled inside her skull. And then, silence. Muffled. Deaf. A moment where time cracked open and refused to continue. When Briggs blinked his way back to consciousness, the clearing was no longer a rescue zone. It was a war scene. Smoke twisted through the trees like black lace. The air reeked of gunpowder and singed hair. A crater had torn the earth where Sarah had been sitting just seconds ago. But she wasn't alone. Shadow was still there, limp, motionless. Sprawled across Sarah's lap, his fur charred and torn, shrapnel embedded deep beneath his ribs. His body had absorbed the worst of the blast, every deadly piece of metal meant for her. He had made himself a shield. Sarah's arms clutched him, locked in place, as if her muscles refused to believe he was gone. Her mouth moved, but her voice came out broken, jagged. Shattered sobs, not words. And Bane. Bane was a ghost on fire. Blood streaked down his right flank, one leg dragging behind him, but he didn't stop. He barked again and again, raw and wild, eyes locked on the tree line. A figure was running. Dark clothes, broad shoulders. The man melted through the brush like he knew this forest better than God. Briggs pushed up on one elbow, vision doubled, hand fumbling for his sidearm. But the pain was too much. His fingers failed him. And Bane knew. He took off, limping but relentless, a growl ripping from his throat like a promise. Dalton groaned somewhere to his left. Sarah's scream pierced the clearing. But Shadow didn't move again. And the moment froze there, a snapshot of sacrifice carved into the bones of the forest. Wade Gentry was found face down in a shallow creek, one arm soaked in blood, the other reaching toward a shotgun he never got the chance to fire. His mouth was filled with dirt and moss. His coat was torn wide at the shoulder where Bane's jaws had locked down and refused to let go. 6 miles. That's how far Bane chased him, bleeding the entire way, his hind leg dragging behind him, eyes locked like a compass set to justice. When the backup team arrived, Gentry was unconscious. Bane lay 5 feet away, sides heaving, muzzle streaked with red. He didn't move as they approached, didn't even raise his head. His job was done, and somehow that seemed to be enough for him. But it wasn't enough for Sarah. Shadow didn't come back. The helicopter lifted off at dusk. A wash of orange bled through the treetops as the rotors kicked up the ash and dirt that clung to her boots. Sarah sat between Dalton and Briggs, who both bore bandages and silence like armor. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft thrum of the blades and the tiny clinking of metal between Sarah's fingers. Shadow's collar. What was left of it? Burnt leather? A twisted metal tag? A scrap of fur caught in the buckle. She held it the way someone might hold a crucifix, tight enough to hurt. At the funeral, the sky was gray, a kind of gray that looked permanent. They laid Shadow to rest beside other canines, his plot smaller, his impact heavier. The entire Ranger Division showed up. Uniforms crisp, faces tight, boots cleaned for the occasion. There were no eulogies, no speeches, just the silence of those who had been saved by something they could never repay. Sarah stood near the front, in a fresh uniform, sleeves rolled down to hide the bruises that hadn't faded. Her face was unreadable. No tears, no tremble. Just that collar still clutched in her hand like a lifeline to something beyond the reach of words. When they asked if anyone wanted to say something, she stepped forward once. No notes, no hesitation. She knelt and placed the badge that had once hung from Shadow's vest on the casket. "He didn't just find me," she said, voice steady but hollow. "He saved me. He gave me back to the world." And then she turned and walked away. Some stories wrap themselves in ribbons and headlines. This one didn't. This one lingered. In the wind that passed through the pines, in the tracks that disappeared into the mud, in the howl that never quite reached the surface of her throat. Because some heroes don't live to be honored. They just leave behind silence, and the weight of knowing they chose you over everything.